She had always been different, the kind of woman whose silence spoke louder than words, whose calm presence in a room of warriors made men straighten their backs. She was not enlisted, not ranked, and carried no insignia, but everyone knew her reputation the moment they saw the long, matte black .50 caliber sniper rifle she carried as if it were a natural extension of her own body. To her, that rifle was not just steel and optics, it was memory, discipline, and survival wrapped into one. It was the tool through which she had saved lives, turned battles, and carved her legend into the dust of forgotten war zones. And when the Admiral reached for it, in front of men who thought they had seen everything, the world froze. The story begins long before that tense moment. She grew up on the edge of nowhere, in a town where hunting was not sport but survival. Her father, a stern man with steady hands, placed a rifle in hers before she was tall enough to rest it properly against her shoulder. By 12, she could strike a can from 100 yards without a miss. By 16, she knew how to breathe with the wind, how to wait in silence for hours, how to respect the power of a weapon that could take life or save it. When conflict tore through her homeland, she had no choice but to step into a world of violence. She never signed a paper or swore an oath, but she picked up her rifle and defended those who could not fight for themselves. Every bullet fired was a vow, every target eliminated a shield placed between death and the innocent. Her legend grew in whispers. Soldiers spoke of her precision, the way she could line up a shot across impossible distances, the way her bullets found commanders before they could issue orders. Some said she was luck, others said she was supernatural. But those who fought beside her knew the truth. She was relentless discipline, hours of patience, and a heart steeled against fear. Her .50 caliber was her closest companion, and she guarded it with the same fierce loyalty she had for life itself. When she first worked alongside the Americans, it was not by design but by necessity. A convoy had been ambushed, pinned down by enemy fire from elevated ridges. She appeared like a shadow, crawling into position with her rifle, scanning the ridgeline. Within minutes, 6 enemy gunners fell in silence, their positions neutralized with surgical precision. The convoy moved again, lives were saved, and the men who witnessed it never forgot. From that day forward, she was a mystery they could not solve but a force they trusted completely. It was weeks later, during a high-stakes operation, that the incident with the Admiral occurred. The team had been flown into a forward operating base, a place buzzing with tension as enemy movement increased in the surrounding hills. The Admiral himself had come to oversee the operation, a man used to authority, used to having his orders followed without question. When he saw her rifle, massive, powerful, and gleaming under the desert sun, he walked toward her with curiosity. He was a man who had commanded fleets, held power that stretched across oceans, but he had never held a rifle like hers. He reached out, his hand closing on the cold steel of the .50 caliber. The reaction was instant. She snapped her hand around his wrist, her grip like iron, her eyes locked on his with a fire that startled even the seasoned soldiers around them. "Hands off my rifle," she said, her voice low, calm, and commanding in a way that left no room for argument. For a heartbeat, silence ruled the base. The Admiral, unaccustomed to defiance, felt the strength of her grip and the weight of her gaze. She released him only when he stepped back, her rifle never leaving her side. It was not disrespect, it was a message. That weapon was not a trophy, not a plaything for admirals to touch. It was her lifeline, and more importantly, it was the lifeline of the men she had saved time and time again. The tension did not last long, for almost as if fate had staged it, alarms broke out moments later. Enemy forces had launched an attack, mortars striking the outskirts of the base, rifle fire echoing in the distance. The men scrambled to defensive positions, but she was already moving, climbing the tower, setting her scope, her fingers calm on the trigger. Through the chaos, through the smoke, she counted targets. 1, 2, 3, each shot thundered like a hammer, the recoil of the .50 calories shaking the ground beneath her. 4, 5, 6, all down before they could advance. The battlefield shifted in minutes, enemy fire silenced, their assault broken under the weight of her precision. When the dust settled, men who had doubted her now looked at her as something beyond a soldier. The Admiral, who had reached for her rifle just moments before, now stood silent, his face marked with something between awe and humility. He had commanded ships, men, and missions, but what he saw in her was command of an entirely different kind. She did not need a uniform or medals. She needed only her rifle and her will. Without ceremony, without a word, he gave her the slightest nod of respect, a gesture small in appearance but massive in meaning. The story spread far beyond that base. Soldiers whispered of the woman who had stopped an admiral in his tracks, who broke his grip on her weapon and then, minutes later, broke the enemy assault with 6 perfectly placed shots. She became more than a sniper, she became a legend. They called her many things: the Phantom, the Ghost, the Woman with no name, but to those who had fought beside her, she was simply the protector, the one whose presence meant survival. And she remained as she had always been, silent, watchful, carrying her rifle through the dust of forgotten wars. She never sought recognition, never claimed glory, never allowed her name to be written in the records. She was the kind of legend who walked away when the battle ended, leaving only stories behind. Somewhere, in another conflict, on another night, she would set up her rifle once more, her eye steady, her finger patient, her will unshakable. And always, always, her words would echo for anyone who tried to claim what was hers: "Hands off my rifle."